Good evening, people. Annii K here for another episode of Annii Gets Healthy here on 93.5 CHMR FM. Annii Gets Healthy is a program where I discuss the things I do to maintain a healthy lifestyle after my recovery from long-term obesity. My health is something I will likely continue to monitor closely for the rest of my life, and I've developed a pretty big interest in what makes our bodies perform as intended as a result of that. As always, I will start the show by reminding anyone tuned in that I am not a physician or trained medical professional. All of the opinions I share on this show are based on my experience with my own body and backed up with the advice of doctors, researchers, trainers, and nutritionists. But it's the advice that I take that works for me. A lot of people try different approaches that work for them. So take all of that with a grain of salt. Naturally, not everybody will share all of these opinions, and that is totally okay. In fact, it is great to engage in dialogue about what you consider to be healthy. I would much rather people discuss opinions on what makes them feel good than for people to avoid conversations on health entirely. That being said, if you would like to talk with me, you can find me on Instagram at Annii Gets Healthy. That's ANNII Gets Healthy. And I actually recently started a new Twitter, which is at Annii K Health. That's ANNII Health. So follow and message me on there if you have a topic that you want to hear about on the show, or even if you just want to talk about what's on your mind. Basically, what you can expect to hear on the show this season is researchers, professors, people working in the field of health who are just passionate. Not only that, but lay people as well. People who have had some sort of positive interaction with what they consider to be a healthy lifestyle that has changed them and their mindsets for the better. And the thing that I want to really push on this show is just people challenging themselves and thinking outside the box and trying things that they didn't want to try before. Once again, the end game here is to feel better, and if you keep doing the same things over and over again, you're never going to have a different result. So, anybody who's tuned in now who has never listened before, well, it's only the second episode anyways, I welcome you to the show, and I hope that you can learn something. And once again, if you reach out to me, I hope that I can learn something from you. I'm just going to get right into it. Today's episode is in some way a continuation of the last episode. Last week, I shared a very personal autobiographical tale about my relationship with my weight. There were a lot of toxic emotions that lived inside of me when I was obese, and it felt incredibly cleansing to let all of that out on the radio here for you guys. I did not, however, place much emphasis on the activity portion of my journey through weight, nor did I really go in depth on exactly what nutritional changes I made and when. While it was very important to talk about the emotional and even the humorous side of my experience, I do intend to provide more concrete information on exactly what I did. Mindset is very important. In fact, I would say it's definitely one of the biggest things, but it on its own doesn't affect the numbers on the scale. In terms of talking about physical fitness, tonight's episode is called From Fat to Fit, Discovering My Capabilities. I will describe my relationship with exercise in my childhood and later detail my introduction to fitness as a key aspect of lifestyle that occurred only about 18 months ago. Welcome back to Annii Gets Healthy. As I said before the break, this episode is called From Fat to Fit, Discovering My Capabilities. One of my earliest memories from school is kind of a silly one. I was about 5 years old and a real tomboy, which never changed, to be honest. I used to take pride in being able to lift things above my head and walk around with them because it made me feel strong like a boy, I say in quotes. 5-year-olds don't really challenge gender norms in too much depth. At least they didn't in 1997. One afternoon, I flexed my bicep to a boy in my class and asked him to feel my muscles. He poked at my arm and laughed. "It feels like a piece of construction paper." I chuckled to think about how offended I was at that, to be honest with you. But the point was, strength was a trait that I valued a lot as a child. In fact, I think the idea of being physically strong never went away as a kid. As a child, I was put into dance class and gymnastics, probably something else along the way. But after my cousin joined Taekwondo, I begged my mother to join. She gave me an ultimatum. I could only do Taekwondo if I ceased my other activities. needless to say, it was a no-brainer. I did Taekwondo for about 5 years. To be fair, it was a huge part of my identity. I often placed first in sparring at provincial championships, enjoyed memorizing my forms, and took pleasure in owning my board and eventually breaking skills. Sadly, with the coming of age comes apathy, and Taekwondo was one of the first victims of it. So close to getting my black belt, I just lost interest. I took up guitar instead, but I never really had the passion for playing the guitar the way I did for martial arts. Believe me, music was an integral part of my life for many years after that. Thus, my years of producing music and doing previous shows on this station. I did attempt to involve myself in other things after Taekwondo. In grade 9, I played volleyball for the high school team for just 1 year. I did not continue the following year. We were not great. It was fun, but it didn't really grip me. Nothing did. I definitely did enjoy that feeling of social facilitation, that dynamic when you perform with a team, because when I was in school, I really didn't have that feeling of fitting in too much. The school that I went to placed a lot of emphasis on athletics, and you kind of tended to see the same people on every team. It was these like high achievers in the classroom, but also, in the gym. And you kind of see all these people, and you do rank yourself. You see these people who are on the winning teams, and they're just kind of getting patted on the back all the time. And you know what? That's really fair. And, people who are involved in athletics and who excel in athletics definitely deserve to be recognized. But I definitely felt left out, and I didn't really know where I fit in that. When I did Taekwondo, I was so big on the personal aspect of that, and I really enjoyed that private participation in sport. But I never felt like to compete for my school. I never felt like I was good enough for that. And now coming at this from a recreation perspective, I do see that as problematic, and that's definitely something that I want to discuss in future episodes, because I think this happens to a lot of kids. Like, you grow up with this enthusiasm of wanting to be a part of something and wanting to participate, but something at some point in time, and I said this on the last episode, I started to realize when I was about 8 years old there was something different about me, and that was called fat. Kids are the most honest of anybody, and they will tell you what is on their mind, and that's just the way that things are. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing, I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world, but for me, I definitely knew where I was, and I was able to kind of categorize myself for the worse as a result of that. I had low expectations for what I could provide, and even when it came to, testing in gym, I just didn't try to... I didn't have any sense of internal competition with myself, because the way I figured it is that I could never do it. I could never go above and beyond. And I think that this generation is changing, but in my time, the physical educators didn't really care. They weren't really that big on seeing you beat your personal best if you weren't of interest to them. And don't get me wrong, I had some lovely gym teachers growing up, I really did. They were very nice people, and a few of them, I had great conversations with that helped me a lot growing up. But in terms of my physical performance, there was never a big push. And once again, as time goes on, we're increasingly worried about offending people, but the people who were concerned about offending me were the people who should have been pushing me. And the people who weren't concerned about offending me were the people who could actually be detrimental. And that's not a me thing, that's a thing for all children. And once again, I really am, my original hope when I came to MUN was to study phys ed before I changed my mind and decided to pursue rec, just because I really hope that this generation will have a different outlook on how we treat children in the educational environment, that it's not about covering the gym with banners, that it's not about, making sure that the best of the best do their personal best, that if someone is sitting on the sidelines and being what we would consider lazy, that rather than scoff at it or ignore it, that we actually engage with it and just try to, find out what the original problem is and what we can do to engage with that person. So once again, I have really high hopes for this, and I say all of this just coming from where I've come from. So After volleyball, I really don't think I did anything else physical in high school. I did improv in junior high as well, but in high school, it wasn't just physical activity that I didn't participate in. I really didn't participate in much of anything. As I said, I messed around with music, had some lessons here and there, but, I did sing in a choir, and for some years I played in a school band, but nothing in the sense of, leisure that wasn't being graded on some level, because all musical performance, you did get a grade for that, and it was a credit that you would get. So there was definitely no, freely chosen leisure that I really participated in. I was bored a lot, and boredom is a very negative thing because it leaves us seeking all sorts of other things. Nowadays, I love going to the gym. I love getting my blood pumping, and I didn't have that then. And so, I alluded to this last week. I turned to a lot of things that I thought were going to fix that void inside of me, and they just didn't. Nothing really worked. I never really had anything that was just so physically motivating to me. So the one thing that, increased and increased every year was my weight. I was on and off with various health-related programs throughout high school. Regardless, I seemed to constantly gain about 10 pounds every year. I spent a year at a big box gym that no longer exists, actually. Then I spent a year in Curves, if anybody remembers Curves. I think they still exist, actually. And I spent another year at Weight Watchers. Once again, they were initially beneficial to me in some way, but they didn't change my mindset. If your mindset remains static, so will your condition. Diets do not work. You can count points on the program's perfection and lose weight every week, but once you deviate, especially permanently, from it, the weight takes no time to come back at all. My last attempt at Weight Watchers was in grade 12, I believe. I was 208 pounds, and I wanted to get under 200 for grad. I probably did get there for grad night, but by graduation itself, I was pushing 220. Then came MUN, and subsequently came the freshman 40 or 50, and by then there was no activity in my life. None. I am not exaggerating of this, I promise you. I went to school, came home, barely studied, and stayed up late. I would just play video games and watch TV all night long. Then the spring and summers would come. Naturally, some of my friends would want to go for walks and hikes, but this was just too much for my body to bear. I had no on-paper disability, no chronic condition. Between this and my diet, not to mention other lifestyle factors that were harming my health, things were just getting worse with time. And I kind of skimmed through what happened when I came to MUN, how I left MUN. But things just went from bad to worse. I was just eating everything in sight when I was here, and I was getting driven here every day, so my amount of walking didn't really change. I probably moved less when I came to MUN than I ever did in my life. I never bothered to go to the MUN gym. This is a side note, but I really do think that this life is a really precious gift, and that it's not meant to be spent indoors all the time. And if we are indoors, it's definitely not meant to be spent sitting on a couch and scrolling on our phones and living from one glowing rectangle to another. It's not meant to be spent going to work and sitting behind a monitor, and then going to the bathroom and sitting behind a phone, and then going home and sitting behind a TV, and then getting in bed behind an iPad before you finally put it down and close your eyes, and not getting enough sleep before you repeat the process once again in the morning. We were not meant to live like that, of this I assure you. But we do. And that's just the thing. And I did. Even though I got better at dealing with people and I didn't feel that inadequacy that I did before, I just, I wasn't giving my body or brain what it needed. I was really starving my brain, starving myself in so many ways, not in terms of nourishment, although that can be argued. No, I had starved myself spiritually in some way. I'm not a religious person, but if you don't have any sort of balance in your life, you're not going to be a balanced person, and I know I wasn't. I was depressed all of the time. I had no energy for anything, despite doing nothing that required energy. Always tired. And so I was here for 3 semesters. And I struggled to keep my grades up because I didn't even have the motivation to do the work. My grades were so